This podcast is a proud member of Pod Nation Media Network.
Flicker of reels, the shadows crawl. Curtains rise, a ghostly sprawl. The frames are whispers, the stories call. The drifters hum in a hollow tune. Moonlight cuts through velvet gloom. Is it a dream or a real too soon? Step into the screen where the dark turns keen. Journey with the cinephile, unseen, unseen. The veils twist and turn as the silent light burns. A world unknown where the shadows yearn.
Hello and welcome, listeners, to Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast, where we take a deep dive into the world of horror cinema, from the eerie classics to the latest spine-chilling releases. Join me as I explore the history, themes, and artistry of horror one film at a time. Whether you're a seasoned horror fan or just stepping into the shadows, this journey is for you. So dim the lights, embrace the fear, and let's talk horror. And let's do that on episode 323. I'm your tour guide of David Garrett Jr., recording out of Columbus, Ohio. So this one here for you is going to be my new year, new movie number 23. So the randomizer selected The Initiation from 1984, and I'm pairing this up with We Bury the Dead. So the double feature thread that you can kind of do here, even though we have two different type of movies, is that both of our protagonists are defined for their search for answers. One looking for their identity, one looking for resolution. And then there's also some hidden family stuff helping to drive horror. And then you also have the evolution of the final girl in two different ways. One of them being the final girl trope, with the other one being like a dirt and grit type of survival thing. So that will be the through line here for these. And then also here for mini reviews is that we are going to be doing The Beast with Five Fingers. This is going to be my next one of the Scouring Through the Sixes. And then I'm also running through some of my lists that I've been trying to get through for a while here. The next one's going to be The Legend of Blood Mountain, aka Demon Hunter. I'm also going to have Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. Then there is The Untamed. And then the last one for the actual features that I'm going to be covering here is going to be a screener I got to check out of The House on Hallowed Grounds. And then I'll have 4 episodes of the original Twilight Zone series as well. So I think that's all I'm going to do here then for this intro, outside of saying thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy coming on this journey with me.
Hey, I'm Jill, the host of the Murder Shelf Book Club podcast. Every other week, I feature a true crime book by one of my favorite authors, telling you the story with respect for the victims and loved ones. But I don't stop there. A psychology educator who's also studied serial killers, I analyze the cases and I endeavor to explain the whys. Why do people do this? Told in trilogies, Part 3 is dubbed Second Cast, where I cast a wider net going into some surprising, bone-chilling directions. Cold cases, homicides, missing persons, serial killers, and stories from history. These both fascinate and appall us. This is a true crime book club, so read with me or let me read for you. Join the Murder Shelf Book Club podcast and see what I'm pulling off the murder shelf next.
Listen, here's the truth. If it's not something you love to do, automation is mandatory. You didn't start your podcast to spend hours editing clips. You started it to create, connect, and grow your audience. But here's the problem. Every other platform works with video podcasts, and manual editing eats up your most valuable asset, your time. That's where Opus Clip changes everything. Upload your video, and Opus Clip will automatically find the gold nugget moments, auto-clip the captions for the best parts, perfect for TikTok, Reels, and Shorts. 1 hour-long episode becomes 10, 20, even 30 viral-ready clips in minutes. The tool even predicts each clip's viral potential, so you know exactly what to post. No more tenuous editing, no more wasted hours, just you staying in the place that you love to be. creating content that matters. Head to podnationopus.com for your free trial and get back to doing what you do best. Stop editing and start creating now.
And for my first mini review here is going to be The Beast with Five Fingers from 1946. This is directed by Robert Florey and written by Kurt Sodomek. This stars Robert Alda, Andrea King, and Peter Lorre. So this is a drama, horror, mystery, romance, thriller film that is from the United States, currently sitting on a 6.5 on IMDb and a 3.3 on Letterboxd, where a synopsis being. Locals in an Italian village believes evil has taken over the estate of a recently deceased pianist where a murder has taken place. The alleged killer, the pianist's severed hand. So this is one that I originally learned about thanks to the Horror Show Guide Encyclopedia that I've been working through. I would have seen it probably a few years ago. I didn't remember much. I am now giving it a rewatch, though, as part of my scouring through the sixes here. And where I'm going to end up jumping in is that this is based on a short story by William Fryer Harvey of the same name. This does get looped in with the novel by Maurice Renaud, which is an interesting one that we have the opposite kind of things happen here of The Hands of Orlok. Instead of the hands being grafted onto the lead character, who descends into madness, we're getting is it's believed that these disembodied hands are the ones doing the attacking. This can be a cheesy idea. How it's handled here works well. So now that's set up, let's kind of jump into the foundation of the film. I do find it interesting that we have this small town where we get to meet the character of Bruce Conrad, portrayed by Alda, and it's interesting that we establish him as a con man before we get to go to this isolated estate where all the events are going to play out. And that estate is belonging to Francis Ingram, portrayed by Victor Franken, something like that. So it's interesting is that Bruce is good friends with Francis, and then outside of having these feelings for Julie Holden, who is the nurse portrayed by King. Now, what is good here is that Bruce just wants he wants Julie to be happy and free, which means leaving this place as well as him. So Francis is partially paralyzed, wheelchair-bound character as he gathers these guests. His paralysis, possibly from a stroke, prevents him from playing the piano, which is upsetting. He can play it one-handed, though. So he has an infatuation for Julie, who is his nurse, and it makes her slightly uncomfortable, but it's handled in a non-creepy way. So it's kind of, we have this older man who has these feelings for his caregiver. This dynamic still complicates the situation regarding the will. Franson, whatever, plays this role well. Now, Hillary's interest in astrology is noteworthy, and Hillary is being portrayed by the great Laurie. He predicts Bruce's potential death by noting a famous historical figure born under the same sign and what their fate was. Now, his choice of study may hint at his madness, which is evident when he becomes agitated about his books being taken away. And this is when Raymond Arlington, portrayed by Charles Dingle, and his son Donald, portrayed by John Elvin, they show up and they're talking about how everything could probably be left to them and they're going to make some drastic changes. So then Hillary's choice of study, like I was saying, is there. And then Hillary insists that Francis's disembodied hand is the attacker. And then the bruises on the victim's neck match the one on his own because Francis actually snaps and chokes Hillary before he dies. Laurie masterfully portrays Hillary's descent into insanity. So then some other things to explore here is that we're playing with reality being subjective to the person. You can see this through isolation and obsession, leading to vivid paranoia and hallucinations. Also the idea that guilt is a catalyst. There's this idea of greed through transactional relationships. Inheritances being cursed, occult versus logic as another one that stuck out. I also like that Francis is an artist who lost his abilities. His physical body is failing, which results in him losing his agency. Moving to the rest of the acting, the supposed stars, Alda and King, they're kind of unremarkable. Peter Lorre steals the show. We also have J. Carroll Nash here, who plays this investigator who's quite competent and just needs more information to solve the case. Franson sets the stage well. Dingle and Elvin effectively portray their distress with the new will that leaves them out of everything. Then we also here have David Hoffman, who is portraying Duprex, who is a lawyer, and he's come to read the will. He's also there when the will gets changed. I also think the rest of the cast complete their necessary roles. All that's left then to be filmmaking aspects. The cinematography effectively establishes the isolated manor and nearby village, highlighted by the opening tourist scene. Despite limited effects, the animated hand is impressive. The use of hallucinations and the diegetic piano music, which guests mistake for a ghost, successfully blends the necessary atmosphere. Overall, this is made well. In conclusion, this is a captivating blend of horror and psychological thriller that utilizes a seemingly absurd premise, a killer disembodied hand, to explore deeper themes of guilt, greed, and insanity. While the romantic leads are forgettable, the film is anchored by Laurie's chilling and masterful depiction of a descent into madness supported by strong performances from Nash and Franson. Now, the cinematography is effective, and atmospheric use of sound and limited special effects solidify this as being well made. If somewhat overlooked, classic that successfully questions the boundary between supernatural horror and mental mental breakdown. So my rating here for The Beast with Five Fingers, I give this one a 7 out of 10 after the second watch. Then up next here, I have The Legend of Blood Mountain. This is from 1965, directed by Massey Kramer, and then this was written by Bob Corley. This is starring George Ellis, Aaron Fleming, and Edward Yaston. This is a comedy, crime, drama, horror, mystery, thriller film from the United States. Currently sitting on a 3.2 on IMDb. Not enough ratings on Letterboxd, but I would say between like a 1 to a 2-star movie over there, with our synopsis being: a small-town wannabe newspaper reporter suspects that a wave of murders committed in the area may not be the work of a serial killer, but a monster. So this one popped on my radar when I was working through, once again, that Horror Show Guide Encyclopedia. It was listed in there as Demon Hunter, so it was the next film up for the letter D that I'm working through. Now, I'm going to end up moving it down because I go by what the Internet Movie Database, and actually Letterboxd also has it listed as The Legend of Blood Mountain, so that is where it'll end up going, is down to the L's. So I'm going to go ahead and start, though. This is low budget. It's a regional one being made around the Atlanta area from what I'm gathering. It appears that Ellis owns a local theater down there in that area, was a cinephile, and was a late-night horror host, using the character that he is in this movie of Bestoink Dooley. So that adds a bit of charm of what we're getting here. So now that out of the way, this, again, isn't very good. I do think part of it is that it doesn't have much in the way of a budget. It also feels very amateur as part of it. They are using what was available to them. The locations they use, like Bestoink's apartment and the building where the newspaper team works, and then from there we have this mountain where the other places outside of it. I'll give credit for what they did to make this. Let's look at that lead character of Bestoink. He's bumbling. He has these grand dreams of having women love him, and that he'll obtain that by being this newspaper man. His boss doesn't think he'll make it, but he doesn't care, and he does what he can because it's his time off is where he's going to go up to this mountain to do this report and try to see if he can find anything. I do love the idea of going to Blood Mountain and stumbling on the story that he thinks is going to, adds up happening there, putting himself at risk. It does make me chuckle, and I'll give credit to Ellis there. I also like the idea of this monster. I love the practical approach to it. That adds charm. It feels a bit of a throwback to the decade prior and what they would do to make things like this work. Seeing what they put together, it doesn't look all that real, but I still appreciate it. There's some other things I want to bring up here. I love this regional folklore for this mountain with a monster. There is skepticism for anybody who isn't from the town. I also like the idea that there's this natural occurrence where the rocks bleed. We end up meeting this guy up here who gives a logical explanation that it's probably just iron being leaked out and everything like that. But they end up figuring out there's actually blood on some of these rocks. But there's also this underdog, bumbling hero who puts himself in a situation to succeed. The last thing would be man versus nature, where we have this primal monster. I'll then shift over to take a look at the filmmaking aspects. The cinematography and framing were fine. Being able to capture the setting like the mountain, nature, and even these beach scenes for the teens. They do hide some of the scenes for what the creature looks like. Other than that, the soundtrack was fine. It doesn't really add anything or hurt the overall tone. There's some good design here with the cutting back and forth between scenes. I wanted to give credit there. I'll then end out this review by saying the acting performances were fine. Since this is a regional independent film, I'll temper and not go too hard with the critiques. Ellis is probably the best performance. Fleming and the others, they kind of work at helping to solve this mystery that were decent. The problem here is that everybody is stiff and comes off wooden, and I don't know if they're reading off cue cards or they just didn't necessarily read their lines or they just don't know how to give emotion to it, but it's just lacking emotion. That's kind of the issue. In conclusion, this is a fascinating piece of regional low-budget cinema that manages to capture charm despite its significant amateur limitations. While the pacing can drag and the acting is often wooden, the film succeeds by embracing its local flavor. The earnest performance of Ellis as Bestoink and the wonderfully practical, if unconvincing, monster design. It's not a technically strong horror film, but viewed through the lens of independent filmmaking and local legend, it offers a quirky, enjoyable glimpse into 1960s regional horror that genre completionists will appreciate for its historical context and sheer effort. So my rating, though, for The Legend of Blood Mountain, I give this one a 4 out of 10. Then I gave a rewatch to Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare. This is from 1991. It was directed by Rachel Talalay. I think that's how you say that. And then we're also giving credit here to Michael DeLuca and Wes Craven for the characters they created. This stars Robert Englund, Lisa Zane, and Sean Greenblatt. This is a dark comedy, dark fantasy, slasher, supernatural, fantasy horror film. But this one is from the United States. It is currently sitting on a 4.7 on IMDb and a 2.1 on Letterboxd, with our synopsis being: dream haunting Freddy Krueger returns once again to prowl the nightmares of Springwood's last surviving teenager and seeks the aid of a woman who has a similar reoccurring dream. So, once again, Freddy being portrayed by England. And I remember this one when it came out, because I was growing up. This has been the first one that I actually got to watch when it first hit VHS. So, it's up there in the franchise with one of the ones I've seen the most because of that. So, my sister and I would watch it regularly. I haven't seen it probably since college, so I was giving it a rewatch here now that I have the Blu-ray set. And I wanted to give it a critical eye, kind of look at it. And this also doubles as an Odyssey through the Ones watch. Where I want to start is by saying that this does some good things. It has plot holes that stick out, but I want to say that I do love the setup here. Freddy finally has gone unchecked and decimated this town. There is this familial connection that he's looking for and wanting to move his reign of terror to somewhere else, so that makes sense. I also like that with everything that has gone down, the adults in the town have been driven mad. They're to blame as well. And I also think that we have this, I like this quick insert during a flashback, and that was a subtle touch here that I thought was also good. From there, I do like the idea of Freddy sending out John, who is John Doe, portrayed by Greenblatt, as he's trying to bring people back into Springwood. The investigation into what happened to Freddy before he was discovered by the parents in the town, I like that. There's a creepy factor here with what was done to his wife, who in this one is being portrayed by, is Loretta Kruger, portrayed by Lindsay Fields. And then we also have this mental torment to when Freddy was a child. Now, prior to this film, we know that his father was a patient in a mental hospital and that his mother was a nun. We also see that he was bullied, he killed animals, and was physically abusive, or was physically abused himself. So, that's all stuff that kind of is stock stuff that you put into serial killers, because that's what has happened in real life. Building more of that backstory is solid, but all the actors, including the great England, they all bring in... all the actors who are portraying Freddy bring that all to life. I thought that was good. All of them fit. So then let me bring my first plot hole. As a child, it got me, but watching it as an adult, it doesn't make sense. John is convinced that he's the son of Freddy. Maggie listens to him, but never points out her dream. It's not possible that the boy would be his child, but it's just weird to let John continue running his theory with no backing. Also, he's not old enough. So then the film also explores themes of cyclical abuse, generational trauma, as seen with the character of Carlos, who is portrayed by Ricky Dean Logan. There's also Tracy by Leslie Dean and Spencer by Breckin Meyer. And then you also here have somewhat with Maggie and then Freddy himself. You also have the sins of the father being revisited. Springwood is in denial over the loss of its children, with adults exhibiting delusional behavior. A new element of Freddy's ability to erase victims, something that strong-minded individuals aren't affected by. We actually get to see that with Doc, portrayed by Yaphet Kotto, and Maggie as well kind of falls into there as well. But the method in defeating Freddy is definitely mirrored with the original film, which I don't have an issue there. The story also tries to humanize Freddy by exploring his past and offers a catharsis through confronting one's demons. Let's then shift over to discussing the actor performances. The cast is hit or miss. England is hamming it up a little bit too much. That's more of the problem with the story and the movie itself. I'm guessing he had fun, though. Zane is wooden and lacks emotion. Greenblatt isn't very good as the character we follow for most of this. Now, Dean dials it up to 11 with her rage. I think that should have been toned back just a bit. I get that she's angry due to everything that she's gone through, but it's a little bit too much. Kotto is by far and away the best performance in this. Meyer and Logan bring charm to their smaller roles. I'd also give credit here to some of the other people that we get here, which I think that... Oh, where is her name? I'll give credit here to Fields. There is also Cassandra Rachel Frierl, something like that, is the little girl here. I thought she kind of worked for what was needed for her role. And then I'd also give credit here to David Dunnard, who plays Kelly. He's a guy who works at the orphanage along with Doc and Maggie. I think they all work in support. We also have some fun cameos here by Johnny Depp, Tom Arnold, Roseanne Barr, and Alice Cooper to help round things out. And the filmmaking has strengths and weaknesses as well. So cinematography and framing are good, but the movie occasionally feels staged, even outside of the dream sequences. Practical effects are a positive, particularly Carlos's excellent kill sequence. While I like the concept for Spencer's kill, the execution was lacking. My main issue is tone. This leans too heavily into comedy, resembling like a live-action Looney Tunes cartoon. We also have, conversely, the soundtrack is effective, especially with the inclusion of the original theme. Iggy Pop does a new theme, I believe, here as well. And I also love Inagata Davida by Iron Butterfly. So in conclusion, this is a polarizing entry, benefiting from a compelling core concept, the final survivor, generational trauma, and a deeper dive into Freddy's origins, but suffering from an inconsistent tone that prioritizes camp over genuine horror. The film succeeds in expanding the lore, features a standout performance by Kotto, and some great practical effects in places. However, the flat lead performances and the excessive reliance on over-the-top comedy ultimately undermine the high stakes and emotional weight the story attempts to carry. While the ending provides catharsis and a film's execution leaves it feeling more like a darkly comedic footnote than a definitive finale for the franchise. So my rating here for Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, I give this one a 5.5 out of 10 this time around. Then I also checked out The Untamed. This goes by the original title of La Région Sauvage, and then this is from 2016, so this actually doubles as a scouring through the sixes when I wasn't even realizing it was going to. So this is directed by Ahmet Escalante, and then they co-wrote this with Gibran Portela. This stars Ruth Ramos, Simone Buccio, and Jesus Meza. This is a Spanish body horror, erotic thriller, psychological drama, mystery, romance, sci-fi thriller film. This actually has a ton of countries that are co-productions here. Mexico, Denmark, France, Germany, Norway, Switzerland. So this is currently sitting on a 6.1 on IMDb and a 3.3 on Letterboxd, or Synopsis. A couple in a troubled marriage become intertwined with a scientist and his wife who have discovered a creature which is a source of both pleasure and destruction. So I learned about this thanks to podcasts. It went on ones of a list to see. I'm now working my way down to that list where this is the next one up, fitting that it's from 2016, like I was saying, and it's been a while, but since I've heard anybody talk about this one, so I came into this one blind because of all that. So where I'm going to go ahead and start then is we have an interesting premise. It sets the stage that something weird is afoot. This is from the opening image of this rock, which we'll come to learn, I believe, is that it's in space and it's kind of just floating there. And then we have this woman of Veronica, portrayed by Buccio, who encounter this creature. From there, we get like an erotic family drama. There's some interesting things that are set up. It kept me interested, but the horror elements are what truly are reserved then for the third act. I'll go ahead and just say here, now Veronica is this woman. She ends up learning that whatever this thing is kind of now starting to reject her. But then we have Alejandra, portrayed by Ruth Ramos, and she is married to Angel, portrayed by Meza. And then they're kind of troubled, and we'll see, and we see why a little bit later on. But then we have Fabian, who is Alejandra's brother. He's Eden Villavicencio, and he is a nurse, and he actually treats Veronica. So that's kind of how they start to get intertwined as things kind of go from there. So what I want to delve into first then would be Alejandra. She becomes our lead, and we learn that she had left Tijuana thanks to Angel. Now, their marriage lacks passion, intimacy is rote, and he seems disinterested outside of, like, we see this weird, like, loveless sexual encounter to introduce them, where she ends up going to try to finish herself off in the shower, but then their children are yelling, so that's interrupted. So he kind of expects her to handle the children, and he's selfish with his needs. Her powerful late-stage statement of she's finally free and happy is a gut punch to Angel. Thought that Ramos' performance was good, seeing her growth was empowering, and those two kids are going to be Ivan, portrayed by Pablo Lopez Perez, and Jacobo, portrayed by Zaire Alberto Gutierrez. So then, I also want to look at Veronica. It is from here we first meet her when she's rejected by this entity, and it's powerful that she feels she's lost the love of her life. That feeling of loss is something that I could connect with. It is fleeting, but Veronica isn't ready to give that up. It also feels as that if she brings others to this creature, it might get her back in its favor, or that's what she kind of believes. I don't think she's intended for what happened to Fabian here, but it does, and Buccio was good in her performance there as well. Let's then shift gears a bit. This film features themes of like forbidden love and unhealthy obsession, seen in Veronica's attraction to the entity. This is mirrored by the relationship between Angel and Fabian. Angel, who is married, is cheating on his wife and exhibits toxic masculinity by refusing to accept Fabian's attempts to end their relationship, which is kind of just weird here, is that Angel and Fabian are hooking up. Now, obviously, Fabian knows that he is married to his sister. And then also, Angel generally kind of just shirks responsibility. Fabian is slightly culpable for engaging in an affair despite Angel being married to his sister, so there's that. I also want to explore this mysterious alien monster. We have Dr. Vega, portrayed by Oscar Escalante, so the director and co-writer, and then he is working along with Marta, portrayed by Bernarda Truba. Now, they're studying it, its effects on those interacting with it. This creature seems to have crash-landed. It was kind of like a asteroid, or like a meteor or something like that, that it also is affecting the surrounding area of where it landed. Veronica's powerful, addictive attraction to it is understandable. It provides pure, perfect satisfaction. However, a loss of compatibility leads to destructive consequences. Before moving from the story, there are also things I want to explore here with this, exploring deep-rooted tensions of Mexican society. There's sexual repression and taboo, and this would be like homosexuality being part of that. The creature could be seen as the id, representing raw, primitive desires. Stemming from that is a dual nature of pleasure, how it's a healing force or a destruction addiction. Angel shows performative masculinity, masculinity. He mocks Fabian while being a closeted homosexual. Angel is also domineering towards Alejandra, who needs to escape his control as well as that of her mother-in-law. Let's then shift over to discussing their performances. I've already said that Ramos and Buccio do well with sharing the leads. Mesa is such a villainous character for different things. He does well in making me feel sorry for him as well, despising Angel. That deserves credit. Villavicencio is a character that bridges Alejandra, Angel, and Veronica. He's good in his role. I'd also give credit here to Kenny Johnston, Escalante, Truca, and the rest of the cast. Kind of just round this out for what was needed. And then the filmmaking here is also quite strong. The cinematography is effectively capturing the city's claustrophobic feel as opposed to the country's freedom. Practical effects were good. The CGI creature looked seamless. Keeping it to there also probably was practical effects in there. I should go ahead and kind of say that on top of it, but keeping it to the shadows until the climax was strategic. The soundtrack and design fit as well. However, the family drama slowed the runtime, causing my interest to wane. So in conclusion, this is a fascinating and complex film with a bizarre sci-fi horror element to explore deep-seated anxieties surrounding desire, societal repression, and gender roles within a Mexican family drama. While the pacing suffers slightly from the extended focus on the central human relationships, the strong performances, particularly from Ramos and Buccio, along with the effective cinematography and restrained use of central creature, make it a compelling watch. It is a powerful allegory for escaping toxic relationships and embracing one's true desires, even if those desires are dangerous or taboo. I recommend this one to those who appreciate genre-bending cinema with a strong socio-political undercurrent. So my rating for The Untamed, I gave this, after this watch, a 7.5 out of 10. And the last feature I'm going to be covering here is The House on Haunted Grounds. This is from 2026, written and directed by Brandon Rudnicki. This stars Logan Thomas, Andrew Thomas, and Stuart Maxheimer. This is a folk horror, found footage, monster, psychological, thriller action film that is from the United States. It is currently sitting on a 8.3 on IMDb, and I would say about a 3 to a 4-star movie over on Letterboxd, or synopsis being. They walked into a haunted house with a history of possession and murder. The victims never came out, but the footage did. So this is a film I got the chance to see thanks to the Horror Collective. They picked this up as it's going to be hitting Bloodstream later this year from what I was reading. So when the screener was offered, I was intrigued since I've enjoyed the other film that I saw from DBS Films, that is. That's the film company. Outside of knowing that this was released in 2026 and it was in genre, I came to this one blind, to start working on those numbers and get some of these independent flicks on there. So where I'm going to start is that this is filmed in the found footage style, which I largely appreciate, though there's some minor inconsistencies with the mounted cameras that were put up in some other rooms. I won't hold it against the film overall, because especially because we get a mix of like body mounted and even a cameraman of Dylan, portrayed by Dylan Devane, following around doing some camera work there, which provides there's a diverse footage to help tell the story, and I'm just a fan of this style as well. I'm actually going to go ahead and say the minor consistency might be just that there's some movie stuff here where you're cutting out filler and they're already up in there, so that's why I'm not going to hold it against it for the most part. So now that's set up, let me delve into more what we're getting. This is a common setup here where we have a ghost hunting show going into a place that has a past, and we've seen this done before both in like real life and used in films. It's an easy way to present the story since there's this built-in understanding that comes with it. The only drawback that I'll say is because of how often it is used, it can be difficult to set your story apart. I do enjoy what was being used here because there's some potential difficulties that come with it, so kind of going that way is kind of a bold move, I would say now. But that ghost hunting show is actually hosted by Amy, portrayed by Logan Thomas, and then Tony by Andrew Thomas. And then their guy who is running everything with their like equipment and everything is Brad, portrayed by Stuart Maxheimer. And then there's Kate, who is like a production assistant on her first job, who's actually in the house with them. And she is portrayed by Kashmir Monique. And then, like I was already saying, Dylan is portrayed by Devane. And I should also go ahead and say that this is the last episode of this show, is that Amy wants to kind of move on. Tony's hoping that if this one is successful that they'll kind of keep going. But yeah, that actually kind of creates a little bit of their issues. So let's go ahead and start looking at what sets us apart. It's playing on the fear of clowns, since this serial killer that was in the house that died, that we get in this like opening sequence, is Lester Morgan. And he would wear what he was when he was killing, like he'd wear a clown mask, that is. Now we're seeing that this goes supernatural as well, since it is a haunted house film. The team does multiple things to try to wake the spirits up, putting them at risk. There are a few scares done that got under my skin, like us seeing something that our characters don't. That makes me uneasy. I also like the reflections not moving. There's one scene here where somebody does almost like a Bloody Mary or like a Candyman thing, and then they walk away and the reflection's still standing there. That's creepy. There's also a hidden room. That felt like a little bit like a throwback to old Dark House films, which I'm a sucker for. So I should be done for the story. Let's go over to that performance. I thought Logan and Andrew Thomas are solid as our leads. Amy is tired of Tony's antics, subtly pushing back as he insists the show should continue on. on, concluding that she actually is the one that says him that she no longer needs him and is done with his type of stuff. So Maxheimer he seems nerdy but dangerously as much of our characters. Brad calls out Tony, which was a surprise. Monique and Devane, plus the actors playing the ghosts, they all fit their roles well. The acting has an amateur feel that's acceptable, especially for this style of filmmaking. So let's go over and talk about those filmmaking aspects. I've already said that my piece on the style. The setting makes it even more eerie, especially with it being as dark as it is. Found footage adds to the atmosphere. Finding that hidden room builds on it as well. We get some good practical effects here. I wasn't necessarily expecting them to go where they did, and it went brutal. I'm assuming there's probably a little bit of CGI used here, but if it was done subtly, and I can't even necessarily point out anywhere where I thought it would have been. I do like the diegetic use of sound, so credit there. No major issues with how this was made. And then in conclusion, this is a compelling, effective entry into the found footage subgenre. This ghost hunting show in a haunted house film feels fresh with the fear that we have of the serial killer of Lester Morgan and some strong supernatural elements to go along with that. It succeeds with some diverse camera work, unnerving scares, especially missed subtle moments by characters, and some solid practical effects and atmospheric setting. Amateur yet fitting, acting is grounded by the dynamic between Amy and Tony. This brutal, unsettling watch is a must-see for found footage genre fans when it hits bloodstream. So if you enjoyed like these well-made lower budget films, I would say give this one a go. So my rating here for The House on Haunted Grounds is going to be a 6 out of 10. And I do believe in the very beginning for my intro I might have mispronounced it and called it Hallowed Grounds, so if I did, apologies there, but yes, The House on Haunted Grounds. And then I have 4 episodes here of the original run of the Twilight Zone that I'm going to be covering, and the first one is going to be Season 5, Episode 19 of Night Call. So this one was actually directed by Jacques Tourneur, and it was written by Richard Matheson, so quite a duo there. This stars Gladys Cooper, Norma Marlowe, and Martine Bartlett, and the synopsis: late-night phone calls begin to haunt disabled elderly Elva Keene in her sequestered home in rural Maine. So I'll go ahead and say that the main character there of Elva is portrayed by Cooper. So this one, she's getting late night calls, and there's not really any, it's just heavy breathing at first. And then she tries to talk to her housekeeper here of Margaret Phillips, portrayed by Marlowe, and she doesn't really think there's anything happening. She just thinks it might have been a down power line. There's a Miss Finch who is working as a woman who's an operator. She's portrayed by Bartlett. And then it actually makes our main character wonder if she's having a heart attack with how scary she gets. And then it's actually kind of creepy because it gets traced and that downed wires at a cemetery where it's coming from. And when we actually kind of see what happened there, it makes a whole lot more sense why she's getting these phone calls and kind of what left her to be in the state that she is. This one's very creepy. So my rating here then for this one was I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. Then next up, I have Over and Out Probe 7 is what I think this one's called. Or Probe 7 Over and Out, I had it backwards. This one is episode 9 according to the run there. They're a little bit out of order how I'm watching them on Tubi and Amazon. So this one's directed by Ted Post. It was actually written by Rod Serling, the guy who actually hosts everything here. And this one is Colonel Adam Cook, stranded on a distant planet with no hope for rescue, learns war has killed his people back home. So this one here, Adam Cook is portrayed by Richard Basehart, and then there is Eve, who ends up meeting here, Eve Norda, who is portrayed by Antoinette Bauer. And what I like here is that he crashes on a planet, he's trying to call home, gets through. Now, it's not a very good connection. He needs a lot of help, though. He has major damages to his ship, and he can't get hurt because his arm is broken, and he has another thing that I think his collarbone might be as well. This is where we learn that there's war on his home planet. Both sides are in similar bleak positions. That would be the people back on his home planet as well as people here, or at his predicament here. And then he ends up learning that home is wiped out. I actually love here about the two characters being astronauts and how everything kind of correlates to a major important type thing that gets revealed at the end of this one. And like I said, rather enjoyed this one as well. Gave this one a 7.5 out of 10. And then up next here, I have The Seventh is Made Up of Phantoms. So this one is directed by Alan Korslund Jr. This one was also written by Serling. And on June 25th, 1964, 3 Army National Guard soldiers on maneuvers near the Little Bighorn battle site find themselves unwittingly involved in Custer's last stand. So this one is weird because it feels like we're in the Wild West. We actually get to see one of these guys roll up on his horse and he's talking to somebody else. He brings up Custard and like Little Bighorn, and then there's like natives that are coming after him, and then it shifts over and kind of throws everything for a loop as that we have a tank and we have soldiers that are on an exercise, and I believe those guys are going to be Major Sergeant Major Sergeant, I think it is, William Connors, portrayed by Ron Forster. We have Corporal Richard Langsford, portrayed by Warren Oates, and then Private Michael McCluskey, portrayed by Randy Boone. So then he calls back and actually goes back to talk to his Captain Dennett, who is Robert Bray. And then we end up learning is that they're late on doing some of the things, they're on this exercise, but they end up finding a canteen when they're back out there that looks like it belonged to the 7th Cavalry. So then William knows all the history about Custard, and so does McCluskey, and Langsford is kind of annoyed with them, but what ends up happening is they go back out for what they're supposed to the next day. They end up following the same path, and it upsets their commanding officer, but the weird thing is they can't be found when people are coming after them, and I thought this was kind of an interesting little thing they do here. It has like a time travel, ghost type thing, time is a flat circle. I didn't like this one as well. It's kind of interesting, a little bit overlong in my opinion though as well, but I ended up giving this one a 7 out of 10, so not bad by any stretch. And the last one I'm going to cover here is A Short Drink from a Certain Fountain. This one is directed by Bernard Gerard. I think that might be his name. Maybe it might be Bernard Gerard. But then this one was written between Rod Serling and Lou Holtz, and I hope that might be the coach. But this one starring Patrick O'Neill, Ruta Lee, and Walter Brooke. Aging Harmon Gordon convinces his brother Dr. Raymond Gordon to inject him with an experimental youth serum so that Harmon will have sufficient energy to keep up with his much younger gold-digging wife of Flora. I'll go ahead and introduce those guys. Is that O'Neill is Harmon, his wife is portrayed by Lee, and then his brother, the doctor, is portrayed by Brooke. So this one, we actually see her partying when her husband comes home, and he's just tired. He can't keep up with her, and we see that she's really only with him for his money, and this is driving him mad. So then he ends up getting injected with this drug, like the synopsis says, and it works. He comes out and he's younger. But the thing is, it doesn't stop there. I'm not going to give away what happens in the end, but this one is just rather interesting as Harmon does this thing. It ends up intriguing Flora, and then Raymond kind of realizes that there is a type thing that's going on here that was a consequence that wasn't necessarily factored in. I don't necessarily know if this has been given to people, so that kind of also explains it, but rather good time there that I had with it. I thought it was a little bit fun, and this one I also gave a 7 out of 10 too. So that's all I've here then for mini reviews for this episode. Let me go ahead then and get you over to the trailer of my first featured review.
Before the initiation begins, the subjects are studied. Even their dreams are recorded. Before the initiation begins, the testing areas are selected. The sorority house, the sanitarium, the empty shopping mall.
Delta Rho Chi.
And just before the initiation begins, a toast is required.
And to being young, staying young, and dying young.
The initiation.
Delta Rho Chi be with you.
A fraternal tradition for over 100 years.
Delta Rho Chi.
Created for only one purpose.
Pleasant dreams.
The initiation. The ceremony that will never die, as long as new blood is pledged.
Delta Rho Chi never will die.
And for my first featured review here is going to be The Initiation. This is from 1984, directed by Larry Stewart, and there's some uncredited stuff here done by Peter Crane, and then this is written by Charles Pratt Jr. It stars Vera Miles, Clu Gulager, and Daphne Zugina. And then this also has James Reed, Marilyn Kagan, Robert Dowdle, Patty Hyder, Francis Peterson, Hunter Tylo, Paula Knowles, Trey Stroud, Peter Maloff, Christopher Bradley, Joy Jones, Mary Davis Duncan, Rusty Myers, Christy Michelle Allen, and Cheryl Foster. So this is a slasher horror mystery thriller film that's from the United States, currently sitting on a 5.6 on IMDb and a 2.9 on Letterboxd, with our synopsis being: an amnesiac sorority member who has been plagued by reoccurring nightmares is stalked alongside other co-eds by a killer in a deserted department store where they are completing a hazing ritual. So this is one that I heard about through podcasts. I went on a list of ones to check out at some point. So this was selected by the randomizer here for the segment I like to do in January called New Year, New Movie. So that's why I'm doing a featured review. It also doubles as a foray through the Fours watch, so that is, that's very cool. So let's do some feature notes on before I jump into the movie itself, and I'll start with the director of Stewart. This is his only credit. Now, like I said, we have some uncredited work here by Crane. He has 41 credits amongst everything that he's done, 10 are films. This is the only one he's did in horror and the only one that I've seen. There's also 2 assistant directors here. First is going to be John M. Colwell. He did this for 2 works, only one that I've seen, only one in horror. And the other one is Ned Dowd. He has 5 movies, first that I've seen, only one that he did in genre. Then the writer is Pratt. This is her only credit. Then moving to our cast, I'll start with Miles. She was in 73 features and 3 shorts. I've seen her in 5 things. Not horror would be The Searchers and The Wrong Man. In horror, she's done 11. I've seen Psycho and its sequel. Top 3 that I'm missing are Baffled, Brainwaves, and A Howling in the Woods. Then she co-stars with Gulager. He was in 82 movies and 2 shorts. I've seen him in 10. Not horror, I forget he was in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. He was also in 21 horror works. I've seen A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Return to the Living Dead, Piranha 3DD. Now, top 3 that I'm missing are Feast, The Hidden, and Uninvited. Then let's look at Zugina. She was in 60 films and 3 shorts. Not horror, she was in Vision Quest, has 6 features. I've seen this and The Fly 2. I have not seen The Dorm That Drip Blood, Last Rites, Mad at the Moon, and The Eyes of the Panthers. Those are the missing ones for her. And so let's jump in the movie then. We start off with seeing a nightmare that Kelly Fairchild, portrayed by Zugina, has. She was a little girl. Now she has a nightmare and gets out of bed. Seeking comfort, she goes to her parents' bedroom, and they're making love. Her mother is Frances, portrayed by Miles, and her father is Dwight, portrayed by Gulager. So there's a man that comes into the room and is ended up set on fire. That's when Kelly wakes up. When she does, she's in the middle of a ritual for her sorority that she is rushing. Now, she is doing this along with Marcy, portrayed by Kagan, Allison, portrayed by Tylo, and Beth, portrayed by Knowles. They're the last 4 standing. They're taken before Megan, portrayed by Peterson, who is coordinating their hazing. Now, she wants Kelly to get the keys from her father to a department store that he owns. Their goal here is to steal a uniform of the security guard and bring it back. So the group of pledges agree. So then Kelly goes to class to discuss a paper with her teaching assistant of Peter, portrayed by Reed. Now, she wants to do hers on nightmares, and he gets a little bit hot under the collar because he's doing a major study, and I think it might be his thesis. Now, when he realizes what her reasonings are, he's intrigued and wants her to be part of his study. Now, he takes her down to his assistant. Now, when Kelly's mother learns of what she's doing, she gets quite upset and wants it shut down. We see why later when Peter can't get Kelly out of a trance and her mother has to do something that she didn't necessarily think about. Or there's like some information he's missing there. So as the night of the prank gets closer, we shift over to Fireside Sanatorium. There is a nurse who goes inside and gets uneasy when the patients are agitated. Now, she blames it on a trustee who is working on the landscaping. This is Jason, portrayed by Dowdle. Now, we see that he has a scar on his face. That night when the nurse is leaving, there are a number of patients that are outside. She is stabbed to death in the car. This is the target when he is leaving home to have an affair. Peter starts to look into why Frances isn't telling Kelly the truth. All the while, Kelly prepares for her pledge class to complete their task. Beth quits right before they head over to the store. Megan has more planned than what she's told the trio. When they get to the store, the security guards is nowhere to be found. We also cannot get out of the store as they are locked inside with the killer. The truth of this person is even more shocking than what we even realize. So that's where I leave my recap and action of the character. What I want to start is by saying this has some good elements. I don't know if it's done well enough at hiding the reveals. It could also be that I've just seen too many movies, so most of it kind of clicked for me very early on. There was one thing that I feel was a little bit of a cheat, but it also makes sense. On the whole, I did find this to be enjoyable with things that they're going for. So now that it's set up, let's look at our lead character of Kelly. She is plagued by this nightmare that she does that doesn't completely make sense. It's getting worse, so that leads her to seeking the aid of Peter. Her mother being so adamant about not prying would be weird. It could also be that she remembers all of the therapy and the doctors that they saw when she was younger, not wanting her to have to revert back and have to go through all that again. Now, how she, Dwight, and the strange man factored in, I knew the connection within the first 10 minutes of the movie. I'm glad there was more to it, though. Then shifting gears, this is interesting that this is another slasher film from 1984 that deals with nightmares. The more successful one being A Nightmare on Elm Street. Now, how they use it here is more grounded. Peter being a student who is researching the parapsychology angle of it was good. I love that they're trying to analyze what Kelly tells him to figure out the connection. There is one other element that didn't click until the reveal. I do love that it explains how Jason factors into it. Now, the final story points concern Frances's reluctance to tell her daughter certain things, likely to protect Kelly's normal life from disruption. This creates a stalking risk, though, since she's left in the dark. More likely than as that Frances is hiding it is kind of like a control element. For Kelly, the title, The Initiation, signifies a rite of passage into adulthood, fitting that she's also going into like a sisterhood and a baptism by fire ordeal for survival. Now, the use of the empty department store could be a critique of consumerism, though that likely was more of like a filming convenience, and I'll get into that a little bit more when I jump over to doing some trivia. Let's then look at our acting performances. It was cool to see a veteran actors like Miles and Gulager. Zugina is good as our lead. I like that her inability to remember what happened is creating this issue for the reoccurring nightmare. We get a good arc for her, especially at the climax with the reveal. Reed works as this TA who is taking a liking to Kelly. Kagan actually has a heavy story when she gets to her reveal. Her delivery was good of that. I'd also say that Dowdle, Peterson, and the rest of the cast rounded this out for what was needed. So the filmmaking was solid, especially the cinematography and framing, which are effective using like fuzzy focus to capture the nightmare dream logic. The set pieces, which are like the college campus, sorority house, and the empty department store, they all work well. The limited practical effects look good. The range of weapons was a nice touch. The deliberate slasher typical pacing isn't my favorite, but the suspense building soundtrack did fit what the film needed there, so I will give credit to that. So then some trivia here. Some of the early scenes at the mental hospital were not actually shot by the director. Crane was originally attached, but the production got off to a rough start as shooting fell behind schedule and budget started to be exceeded. Producers subsequently brought in Stewart to replace Crane. The location used for the mall was the Dallas Market Center. The crew would shoot overnight as the building closed after 7 p.m., and then they would have to be out by 7 a.m. the next morning. I'm pretty sure have everything cleaned up, so that's kind of cool there. The original director, Crane, was said to have more like an European art house sensibility that clashed with the producer's desire for a mainstream slasher film. He still managed to direct a few scenes that were before being replaced, which remained in the movie. First starring role for Zugina and her first nude scene, as we get to see her butt crack while changing, just so you know. Kagan, who plays Marcy, went on to host a top-rated radio show on KFI in Los Angeles. As she was an LCSW, a licensed clinical social worker, she took calls from listeners and answered their therapeutic questions. Film debut of Tylo in her only career nude scene. The campus scenes were filmed at Southern Methodist University, SMU, while the Dream Lab sequences were shot in an abandoned Holiday Inn hotel where the production design had refitted a maid's closet to appear as a laboratory. The film was largely overshadowed at the box office by the bigger budgeted A Nightmare on Elm Street, which also released in the fall of '84. Pratt wrote the script for the film after being asked to produce a low-budget horror film for executive producers Jock Gaynor and Bruce Lansbury and producer Scott Winnett for New World Pictures. While writing the screenplay, Pratt deliberately incorporated soap opera elements into subplots involving the Fairchild's family history as he was inspired by the genre at the time. According to Pratt, he initially cobbled together the concept of the sorority initiation pledge taking place within a department store, but the concept had to be reworked when the film scouts were unable to find a suitable location in Dallas available for shooting. Miles, best known for portrayal as Lila Crane in Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho from 1960, was cast as the mother of Zugina's character. Miles, though was not impressed by the film's screenplay, agreed to appear in the film after having met director Crane, with whom she had a quick rapport, and then he got fired. So the majority of the supporting cast were local actors from the Dallas-Fort Worth area, including Tylo and Joy Jones, both of whom were students at Brookhaven College. Filmed in Dallas in '83, The Initiation was given a regional staggered release by New World Pictures beginning in the spring of '84 and continued to screen theatrically through December of that year. It met by largely unfavorable reviews by film critics. In August 2016, it was revealed by Arrow Films were releasing this film for the first time on Blu-ray in both the US and the UK. It was released in the U.S. on November 8th of 2016. As of October 2024, the Blu-ray is now out of print. And then, yeah, that's all I'm going to do here for the trivia. So let's get back over and say that Inclusion is a solid entry in the slasher subgenre that benefits from serviceable acting and an interesting psychological element driven by Kelly's amnesia and reoccurring nightmares. While experienced genre fans might predict some of the twists, the film effectively uses its central mystery and isolated department store setting to build suspense. Thematically, it works as a dark coming-of-age story wrapped in a slasher framework. It's a worthwhile watch that showcases effective 80s filmmaking techniques, offering a satisfying blend of mystery and horror. So my rating here, then, for The Initiation from 1984, I'm going to give this one a 7 out of 10. Not a great film, but I rather enjoyed it as, I'm not the biggest fan of slasher films, so yeah, it's kind of a good thing there. But that's all I'm going to do here. I'm not going to do any spoiler section. Don't necessarily need to do anything there, so let me go ahead then and get you over to the trailer of my second featured review.
Tragic images emerge following the deployment of an experimental weapon.
Next, please. I'd like to join the body retrieval unit. Who was down there?
Just a little further.
My husband.
I want to make a difference.
There should be a way to get to the highway without them spawning us.
I know what you're going through, but if you find your husband, I hope you understand what that could mean.
The odd ones that do come back online Now docile. You have nothing to fear.
You want to know why only some of them come back? They're the ones with unfinished business.
Is it true what they're saying?
They're getting more hostile by the day.
Just a little further. Just a little further.
Just a little further.
And for my second feature review here is going to be my first wide release 2026 film of the year, and it's going to be We Bury the Dead. This is technically from 2024. Did it, I'm assuming, festivals and stuff, but this is written and directed by Zach Hilditch. This is starring Daisy Ridley, Brenton Thwaites, and Mark Coles-Smith. So this one is also featuring Matt Whalen, Chloe Hurst, Kim Jackson, Dan Paris, Deanna Cooney, Nicola Bartlett, Kim Fleming, Kingsley Judd, Salmi Grenisar, Elijah Williams, Luke Jai, Megan Hollier, Steve McCall, David Gannett, and Matthew Parkin. So this is a body monster zombie horror thriller that is a co-production of the United States and Australia. Currently sitting on a 6.1 on IMDb, and then a 2.9 on Letterboxd, or Synopsis. After a catastrophic military disaster, the dead don't just rise, they hunt. Ava searches for her missing husband, but she finds something far more terrifying. So, Ava's betrayed by Ridley. So this is a film that I saw part of the trailer at the Gateway Film Center. Then I saw this featured Ridley. That caught my interest. Then figuring out this was a zombie movie was another notch in its favor. I'm hit or miss with zombie films, so I like to give them chances. So knowing that much, and it was getting its wide release here for 2026, making it the first film on that list, that was enough there. So let's do some featured notes. I'll start with the director of Hilditch. He has directed 7 features and 7 shorts. I've seen 2 of his works. First would be 1922, that film, the Stephen King adaptation, which is also horror. Now he has one other one in genre with Rattlesnake from 2019. There are 2 assistant directors. First is going to be Mark Boskel, who has done this for 14 movies. First of his that I've seen has 3 in genre, and the 2 that I haven't seen yet are Like Minds and Visitors from 2003. Then the other one is going to be Sean Rowe Curran, who has done this for 2 motion pictures. First, I've seen only 1 in genre. Hilditch also wrote this. He has done this for 7 films and 8 shorts. He's done the same 3 that he's directed as a writer. That's a look at our cast. First will be Ridley. Now, she's been in 33 features and 9 shorts. I've seen her in 5 works. Not horror would be the new Star Wars trilogy, and the remake of The Murder on the Orient Express. Now, she's in one other film in genre called Scrawl. So then her co-star of Thwaites, he has been in 23 motion pictures. I've seen him in 3. Borderline horror, it would be Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales as Pirates 5. He was also in Oculus. He has 4 that are released where I've seen this, and Oculus, of course. I have not seen Ghosts of War or Office Uprising. He's also slated to be in 2 other movies of Lost Planet and Stakeout that are both in genre. Then last is going to be Smith. He was in 18 movies and 3 shorts. First of his that I've seen, he has one other one in genre of something called Beast of War. So, for this movie here, we start by learning there was an attack on Tasmania. It was done by the United States, and it was an accident. Australia is seeking volunteers to help clean up the island that was decimated. It seems like it might have been a bioweapon of sorts as well. Now, one of the volunteers is Ava. Like the synopsis said, her husband Mitch, portrayed by Whalen, was at a resort in the southern part of the island. Now, she knows that he was affected by what happened, but she needs to make sure. I'll kind of get into why. The military is in charge of this, and they cannot get to where she wants to go due to it being below the blast site. That area is still on fire. Ava is teamed up with a woman who can't handle it. She then meets Clay, portrayed by Thwaites, whose partner can't either. The 2 then start to work together. Now, he is short with her, just wanting to kind of do the job. The longer they work together, the more that they end up opening up to each other. I'll then include here that their work is to pull the dead bodies out of the building so they can be buried. Now, something odd is happening. Some of the dead are waking up. They aren't aggressive at first, they're just kind of standing there. As time goes on, though, they become more agitated. So then Ava comes up with a plan. The duo are cleaning out a garage when Clay finds a Ducati motorcycle. She asks him to come with her, giving him the opportunity to drive this bike as he really wants to test it out. Now, they have to get to the resort to see if her husband is one of the dead who woke up, and if there's any humanity left in these people. the journey hits a snag. They are needing kind of proper equipment to get past the fires, like proper PPE. Now, they also encounter a soldier of Riley, portrayed by Smith, there's something just not quite right about him, and we kind of see why with a request that he makes to Ava. So that's really my recap and action of the characters. Where I want to start is that this film has an interesting premise. Not necessarily new, but some of the better films in the subgenre do really well at developing their main characters. What we get here is an interesting, subtle commentary on the U.S. who accidentally attacked Tasmania. It didn't create a major conflict. I do feel like there's some jabs here at Americans, as there's a line that gets dropped saying that we're lucky to be allowed to help them with this cleanup, even though it technically would be our mess. And then we see the people that are actually helping from America, and they are acting very boisterous and, not shocking there. So this weapon that hit the island seems to be biological in nature. Whatever it is, it causes the dead to rise. I do like that it doesn't affect everybody. There's something that Riley says to Ava, that he believes the people that still have a purpose are the ones that are coming back. Following this logic, it leads to a gut punch later that carries weight, and the subtle line was well used. I will then shift focus to Ava, since this is a character study of her. She and Mitch are introduced as a loving couple with glimpses of their wedding night. However, we learn their relationship was troubled. Ava wants to get pregnant, but it hasn't happened. They separated on rocky terms, and Ava seeks closure, but where the narrative goes is bleak. Ridley's emotional portrayal was particularly effective, departing from her usually cinematic roles. So, I think she gets a little bit bad rap because not everybody really likes the new Star Wars trilogy, and I think a lot of people look at that as what she can kind of do there, and I actually think she is a much better actor than some of the things there. It's kind of hampered by, those type of larger budget things, where this one allows her to show a little bit. So some other characters here that she encounters, first would be this guy she's working with, Clay. He at first doesn't share much. The more that we're together, he lets his walls down. He doesn't have a loved one lost here, but what drove him to come down here is depression. It explains certain things that he does and why he wants to help Ava. The other important one would be Riley. He is in a similar place as her, losing his wife. It has shattered him, and what he wants to do for his closure gets weird in the best ways possible. I think that this is where I'll leave the story and shift over to talk about the rest of the acting performances. I've already said that Ridley does great as our lead. I thought her connection that she builds with Thwaites, how she handles Smith as well, doing what she can to survive. Now, she has a line, though, of how far she will go, and I like that. The glimpses that we get of her relationship with Waylon, there's some deeper things that goes there, and the more depressing things are, and I think that drives the story well. I'd say the rest of the cast rounded this out for what was needed on top of all that. Let's then go over to filmmaking aspects. I think what they do here is well done. I think that the cinematography and framing do well in giving this a drab look. Since this island is currently on fire, there's that threat looming. Then when you have the dead waking up, the look of them is great. It does seem to be done practically. I also like that at first, they're considered docile. As time goes on, we see they're growing more aggressive. The sound design needs credit for the zombies grinding their teeth. That was unnerving, so credit there. The music does help with the atmosphere as well. So there isn't any trivia that I found, so in conclusion, this serves as an effective character-driven horror film elevated by strong performances, particularly from Ridley. It manages to utilize a zombie subgenre, not just for scares, but as a backdrop for exploring grief, purpose, and difficult relationships. While the premise might not be entirely original, Hilditch delivers a taut, atmospheric, and emotionally resonant experience that successfully blends unnerving practical effects, clever sound design, and a quietly devastating narrative arc. It's a compelling addition to post-apocalyptic landscape, and a well worth seeking out upon, being that this is a 2026 release, and I thought a pretty solid way to start off the year. So my rating, though, I gave We Bury the Dead an 8 out of 10. Again, not going to do a spoiler section since this hasn't been out all that long, so let me go ahead and get you over to one last break before I close out the show.
Are you tired of the coffee crash? Still jittery an hour after your morning cup of coffee? Listen, I used to drink 5, 6, 7 cups a day to just keep going. The anxiety, the stomach pains, the afternoon crash, it was brutal. Then I discovered Rise Coffee, and everything changed. Rise has less than half the caffeine as regular coffee, but here's the magic. It contains 6 organic mushrooms, including cordyceps, lion's mane, and others that naturally sustain your energy without the jitters or crash. We're talking sharper focus, immune support, better gut health, and calm, sustained energy that lasts all day. Plus, it's organic, vegan, and has 0 added sugars. Unlike other mushroom coffees, Rise is USA grown in California. A full spectrum of mushrooms per serving that actually works. Here at Pod Nation, we only partner with brands we actually believe in. And Rise Coffee is the real deal. Head to risesuperfoods.com and use promo code PODNAY15 for 15% off your order. That's PODNA 15 for 15% off. Ditch the crash. Fuel your day the right way with Rise Coffee.
Pod Nation TV has you beamed up with Out of This World award-winning podcasts found exclusively on Pod Nation TV. Download Pod Nation TV for Roku and Fire TV. Pod Nation TV, Out of This World.
And welcome back. So if you'd like to send me any sort of feedback, anything you want read on the show, or any screener requests, anything like that, you can send those to journeywithacinephile@gmail.com. If you'd like to read any of my written reviews or see any of the old past podcast episodes, all of that is being stored over at Journey with a Cinephile. That is my blog, and that's going to be horrorreview.webnode.com. If you'd like to follow me and become friends on Facebook, it's going to be David Garrett Jr. is my name over on there. There's going to be a link in the show notes. And then if you'd like to follow me on Twitter, it's going to be Buckeye from Mish. And then if you'd like to follow my Letterboxd page where I have all of my reviews, whether that is going to be horror or non-horror, that's going to be David OSU is my name on that. Instagram and Threads, I'm David OSU87. Over on my personal Instagram page, you might see some of my family stuff every now and then whenever I remember to post something. My wife is much better at it than I am. But then if you'd like to follow the Journey with a Cinephile Instagram, that's going to be Journey with a Cinephile, all one word. And then also direct you, if you'd like, to the Discord channel. That's going to be the Nightclub Discord, but I have a page over there. And there's also some other great pages of other shows and them kind of messing around and everything like that. Do highly recommend if you want to go ahead and check that out. And then the last thing I'll actually say here, if you would like to listen to the show a day early, this is always going to be streaming over there on the Pod Nation TV app. So I will have, once again, a link in the show notes for that if that is something that you're interested in. So yeah, there's some great stuff here. There's some great shows on some of these other networks and stuff. I highly recommend checking them out. And then for my next episode, this is going to be another of these New Year, New Movie. And so for 324, the two featured reviews, I'm going to be having Primate, and then the randomizer selected Screams in the Night. This has an Italian title. This is a Gialli film, I believe. I can't remember I think it's 81, so I actually had to find this one. I'll kind of get into there. It took me a little bit of time, but I'm going to figure out everything out like that. Then the Scour to the Six rewatch is going to be The Bad Seed. This is from 1956, and then I'll have more mini reviews for you on there as well as I continue to work through lists, and then if I get any screeners in, that'll be thrown on there. So I don't think there's anything else to say here for this outro, except that wraps up this episode of Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of horror cinema. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow along for more deep dives into the macabre. Until next time, keep watching horror, and remember, fear is just a frame away.
It had been a wonderful evening, and what I needed now to give it the perfect ending